It's 6:30, so it's time to get started. Welcome, everyone. I am Brandy Wesley. What's Cooking Toastmasters is honored to present how to write a speech in 5 minutes. This is an interactive workshop, and you are encouraged to remain unmuted. However, please be aware of your surroundings and mute yourself if needed. Today's presentation will be recorded for the purpose of publication. Jamie Pickering is a past district director of District 25. During her time in leadership, she discovered her favorite thing to experience is witnessing that spark of joy when an individual has an aha moment or accomplishes something they just didn't know that they could do. She's made it her mission to seek out avenues to be part of this process and others, no matter what role she may play in it. That's how she finds herself here today. As Jamie is why you are here today, please join me in welcoming her to the virtual stage.
Thank you. Thank you, Brandy, for that great introduction, and welcome everybody who's joining in on the call for this presentation, How to Write a Speech in 5 Minutes. This came from just a small little kernel idea of a brainstorming exercise that is included in the workshop today, but it was just a simple little idea and it blossomed from there. All the information that you see here today is not my original content. I learned it by sitting exactly where you are. I was listening to somebody else give information, give tips and tricks on how to get better at speeches. I listened to the world champion of public speaking, like Ryan Avery, Lance Miller. I watched TED Talks. I practiced. Every once in a while, the district does bring in those past world champion and public speakers, and there's actually one coming up on October 8th. It's sponsored by the Speakers Bureau, but we're bringing it in. It's called Saturday School, and at the end of our time here together, if you guys are interested, we'll make sure we get you a link to that information because it's free. It's open to anybody who wants to join, and the one on October 8th is the 2021 World Champion of Public Speaking coming to speak to us. You better bet I'm going to be there taking more notes and possibly adding stuff to this presentation, to this workshop we have tonight. So our agenda tonight is fairly simple and straightforward, just 3 items. We're going to go over the basics of a speech because you got to start somewhere. Then we're going to do that brainstorming idea that I talked about. When we get to that, it might look familiar to several of you. It's really mind mapping or brain mapping, but I'm going to take you through how you use that to generate some ideas for speeches. And then finally, a big meat portion of this is making it good, or what I call make it good. And that's really the tips and tricks of making a good speech that people want to listen to. So let's start at the very beginning of our agenda here with the basics of the speech. Somebody tell me, there are 3 items to a speech. What is it? Just anybody throw it out. No need to raise hands.
Opening, body, and closing.
Opening, body, and closing. Exactly. Also known as the beginning, the middle, and the end. That is exactly the basics of the speech. Now, I'm going to spend some time on this. And I know you may roll your eyes and think this is really simple, but this is very, very important that we get the basics of a speech down. What is another way to say, maybe using some more words, instead of saying beginning, middle, and end, what are some more words that maybe you've heard this referred to as?
Opening, the body, and the closing.
The opening, the body, and the closing. Yep. Maybe you've heard the tell them
what you're going to tell them, and tell them what you told them.
You got it. Oh, I think you froze. Same way of referring all to the same thing. I learned this back in high school or in middle school with my English class. It looks like my internet is unstable. I just got the message on that, but I assume Chris would flag me down if it was a real issue. Are we good, Chris?
You froze for like 2 seconds,
okay.
But then that's it. Yep.
Okay, cool. Just flag me down if something, I can switch to another internet connection. All right, so very important. Why do we harp on this structure? It's maybe it happens in your clubs. I know this happens in my clubs or has happened in my club, where somebody thinks of themselves as a fabulous storyteller. And they start telling you a story and they're trying to be mysterious and they're trying to have twists and turns and make this big, fantastic story to tell you, but all they've done is lose you. Y'all know what I'm talking about? There's a great storyteller, Garrison Keillor. He's, y'all heard of him? I think a couple people have. He is part of Prairie Home Companion. I think his son has now taken it over. It's a show that the public radio puts out. And he tells the most beautiful stories where he starts at the Chatterbox Cafe and talks about Luann serving up the chicken fried steak there. And then he ends with Lake Wobegon, where all the women are strong, all the men are good looking, and all the children are above average. So he's just this master storyteller. But he's got a complete staff of writers on his side. So we're going to let that be the professionals. And I'm not saying you can't work up to that. It's definitely something you can work up to, but we are going to start back at the beginning and be very simple in our beginning, our middle, and our end. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you. Then I'm going to tell you, then I'm going to tell you what I've told you. And this does look like in the beginning, those kind of forceful words, but then as you practice and you get better at it, it'll sound better, it'll flow better, you'll be able to paint those word pictures even more. Question for you though, why do we speak?
To communicate ideas.
Communicate ideas, okay. Now we're going to set aside the fact that a lot of us on here are Toastmasters and we speak because we're trying to gain confidence, we're trying to get better, but what is the ultimate thing? And I think Bridget, you're saying it, but not quite in the words that I'm looking for.
How about to be heard?
To be heard, to communicate,
to be understood.
Let me ask you this. Are you speaking for yourself? Yeah, the answer is no.
Okay, no.
So are you speaking for yourself? No. I mean, yes, we're learning and we want to get our ideas out there. Yes, that's fine. But when you're on the stage, your consideration is your audience. That's your goal. That's who you're thinking of, your audience. If you're up on the stage only for you, get off. I don't want to hear you. So here, and this is going to be a theme throughout our entire time here tonight, what you do, you need to think about the audience and how they're reacting to you. All right, so we are going to go into our first exercise. And I'm going to give you guys 3 minutes to do this. What I want you to do is write in 3 to 5 sentences, tell us the story of how you transitioned from work to this Zoom call. And if you didn't have work today, then you can just go from whatever else you were doing before to this Zoom call. So I'm going to give you guys 3 minutes, just in 3 to 5 sentences. Tell me how you transitioned from wherever you were before to this Zoom call. Okay, this hasn't been quite 3 minutes, but I see a lot of people with heads up. So I'm going to go ahead and take that as a you guys got this. I would love to hear from a couple of you who is willing to share your couple of sentences on how. Bridget, awesome. Please go ahead.
So the first thing is you assumed I transitioned. I did open my personal laptop. I searched through my email because Joyce sent this as an email and not a calendar invite. I opened Zoom. I double checked that I didn't have spinach in my teeth, even though I actually haven't had any spinach today. And then I launched Zoom. I still have my other work screens up though.
I love that. Thank you very much, Bridget, for sharing that with us. In those short little sentences, she had the beginning, the middle, the end, which I did put in place for you guys. But we got the full story of how she transitioned from where she's, and we learned a little bit about her along the way. That's awesome. Twyla, you want to share yours too? Awesome. Please go ahead. Oh, make sure you unmute. Nope, not unmuted yet. There you go.
Okay. Well, I completed a 2.5-hour drive from Sacramento home, checking in with you about a mile away from the house. I got home carrying my phone in my hand, listening to you, opened up the house, turned on the air conditioner, got my Coke and sat down. Short story.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you, Twyla, for giving us that your story. And I loved it. It was different from Bridget's, right? We all have our unique stories to tell of where we went from and how we got here to now. Can I hear one more? Oh, Amy.
I was eating dinner with my husband and 2 of my 3 children. We were eating egg rolls that we just made ourselves for the first time. And then I rushed into my room and brushed my hair back and opened my computer. Thought I wasn't going to be able to connect by audio, but it worked. And so now I'm here.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy. And that was a little bit of a cliffhanger there. There's some drama going on. It wasn't quite a thriller, but there was a little bit of drama going on. And I love that you mentioned the food, the egg rolls, because you mentioned making food for the first time. That made me think of something. I just made Vietnamese spring rolls for the first time a couple of weeks ago. So you talking about your first time made me think of mine. Hopefully you guys are picking up on some things, some themes that I'm laying down here. Thank you guys so much for sharing. We will have an opportunity later for you guys to share some more items. Let's move on to the second item on our agenda, which is the brainstorming. And like I said, this was really that kernel that started this whole workshop. When I first started in Toastmasters, I was single. First of all, I was not married, and I didn't have any kids, and I really struggled for topics because I'm also an extremely private person. So I was still figuring out in work where I would share, because my club was through my corporation, what level of information I would share with everybody else. And this was taught to me by my very first mentor when I first walked into Toastmasters. The first person that was my mentor assigned to me when I walked in, Barbara, and she showed me how to do this. And as I stated, this may look familiar to some of you. You may have done an exercise before that is like this brainstorming or the mind mapping or the brain mapping, but we're going to walk through it together. So I hope that you have a piece of paper in front of you and something to write with, so that we can walk through this together and have a good time doing it. Because we're going to have a good time, because here's what we're going to do. I want you to think of one of your hobbies. Just any hobby that you have. It can even be Toastmasters, depending on how involved you are in Toastmasters. It might be the only thing you have time for. But there's also hobbies such as reading, running for crazy people, Maybe you like drinking beer, maybe you know, hanging out with your friends, whatever your hobby is. I want you to think about it for a second. And what I want you to do is in the middle of your piece of paper, I want you to write down that hobby. My hobby is scuba. So I'm going to write scuba in the middle of the paper. All right, once you have your hobby in there, I want you to draw a circle around it. You don't have to have super art skills, I promise. You don't have to. We're only going to like circles and lines. It's okay. No, not even stick figures is what you need to do. So off of the center circle of the scuba, I want you, or on scuba for me, I want you to put 3 lines. They can be anywhere. The artistic choice is up to you. Now I want you to take your hobby and think of 3 attributes of that hobby. So if it's reading, maybe an attribute would be genres, electronic versus analog, something like that. So take a look at your hobby, think of 3 things with your hobby and write that out at each of the end of the lines that you drew. So with scuba, I am going to go with equipment. And let's see, we want the certification classes. Oops. That you have to take to get certified for scuba. And then how about vacations? And if you're thinking ahead on me, the next thing you'll know what to do, which is to draw circles around each one of these items. Everybody with me? All right. Next step is take one of these, one of the 3 that you have around the circle. It doesn't matter which one. Pick any one of the 3, and I want you to draw 3 items off of it. I'm going to pick equipment. So I'm going to draw 3 little lines off of it. And I'm going to think of 3 things that go with equipment for scuba diving. You do it for your hobby. I'm going to do the BCD, which is the jacket that you wear that the tank hooks up to. I'm going to do the reg, which is the apparatus that connects to the tank that I breathe from. And let's do the computer. And the computer is your friend. You always want to dive with a computer. So if I complete this out by drawing some circles around these guys, if we take a step back, what does this start to look like?
Bunch of grapes.
Yes, thanks for the literal translation there, Emily. If you have your main subject and you got some points and some points off the an outline.
Outline.
Exactly. There you go. This starts to look like an outline. So all you have to do is then flesh out what 3 items I wanted to do on the class, what 3 items I wanted to do here. And then I've got myself an outline for a speech. Now, it's also possible that you would start on, like, maybe I go to equipment and there's a whole bunch of equipment and I can keep going off of like, I could put more on the regulator and put items off of that. So then your speech could be about scuba, but then it would be just about the equipment on scuba. So you can keep these and keep adding on to them, and you can find the center of your speech, and you maybe end up with 3 or 4 speeches from this activity. Easy, right? Just takes a couple minutes of thinking. Now, here's an important thing is what we did it on. I asked you to think of a hobby. If you're giving a speech in 5 minutes, it's got to be on a topic that you know. 5 minutes isn't enough time to do any research. You've got to have some knowledge on it before. And I can easily speak on scuba because I do it all the time, and it's one of my hobbies. Who is willing to share what you guys have? So tell me your hobby and your 3 things and your 3 things. I see Twyla has her hand up.
Well, how much do you want to tell me? Or you want me to tell? I put down reading as a hobby. Underneath that, I put down as a child, as a career, and as a retired entertainment. So I chose career to talk about as a speech. People
Nice.
think that being a librarian, which is what I became from reading, they think that's a nice quiet job. You know, you just read books and sit around in a quiet place and go shh once in a while. But I took knives away from people. I found guns in the library. I also found a dead man in the library. And then the skills I had to have were people skills, because how do you deal with knives, guns, and dead people in a library? So that is not the quiet career that reading leads you to. So I think I'll go back to childhood and get the paper doll books.
And I want to hear that speech when you give it, Twyla. Can you invite, when you give that speech, I want to hear that, because that is downright interesting. And that, wow. And this, I love hearing people talk about their hobbies. Emily, I saw your hand go up too. Did you want to share yours?
Yes, please. My hobby is quilting, and my 3 topics from there were fabric, finished work, and patterns. I chose to expand upon patterns. There are 3 kinds. They're the ones that I like, the regular pieced fabrics. There's something torturous called paper piecing, and there's something I refuse to do called applique.
I love how we had the designations on each one of those. But do you see how easy you could make a speech out of that? And I know I've seen some of your quilts, and it would be great to do a PowerPoint or just have a slideshow going behind you of all the blankets that you have made thus far. That is awesome. Does one more person want to share? All right, Nifa.
So my hobby is flying gyroplanes. I broke it out into equipment, knowledge certification, and travel ideas. But then I expanded on the knowledge certification because I had to start with a ground school. Then I had to learn how to physically fly the plane. And I am working on the knowledge test for the FAA. So lots to be done to learn to fly a machine like that.
Once again, a great hobby that I know I would like to hear more. Others? Would you like to hear more about just flying? And one day I'm going to make it into the gyrocopter with Nifa. That is one of my goals.
You are.
Okay. We're going to go have lunch somewhere when we go fly. And then I would love to hear about it. And then I could tell everybody about it too. Just excited about that. All right. So I've proven to you guys that I can walk you through one of these. So, you know, maybe you think, oh, Jamie, you had that prepared. So, all right, let's put this to the test. In a Toastmasters meeting, you are often called upon, if you've been in Toastmasters a while, to speak on a subject at the last minute. I'm going to go ahead and clear my drawing so I can start again. What is a topic in a Toastmasters meeting that you may be called on to speak on at the last minute? Anybody?
Any kind of table topic.
So, yeah, any kind of table topic, but specific topics. Like if you're an area director, you might be asked to talk about the education program. You might be asked to talk about. So what do you guys want to do this? We could
evaluations.
We could do how to give an evaluation.
Upcoming conference.
Upcoming conference.
Or summit, excuse me.
Oh, summit. All right. So the summit, that sounds like a really good one to do. So the upcoming summit. I put summit in the middle. And we're going to put a circle around it. And then we got our 3 lines coming out. All right. What are 3 things about the summit we can tell a club about?
When?
Okay, so date and location. What else?
Keynote speakers.
Keynotes.
What's in it for me?
What's
in it for you?
The with them. All right. So which one do you guys want to expand? Why don't we expand the with them? Yeah. All right. So what is in it for them?
Educational sessions.
By golly, yes.
Networking.
Networking, I heard. How about the area council meeting? Oops.
Mhm.
Arriba.
All right, and right there, we have the start. Give us just a couple more minutes. We'll flesh out the other pieces, and we got ourselves a speech that we can get up in front of a club and give, and about the summit. And we started with, what was it, 60 seconds ago? We had no idea what we're going to speak on. Now in 5 minutes, we can give it. Y'all see how this works? Any questions on any of this process? It's fairly straightforward. I just encourage you to do it. Keep some paper handy. And I do this every time I'm asked to speak at the last minute. This is the exact process I go through. Sometimes I actually draw it out too, just because it helps to see it. Oh, that's funny. What's in it for Marquita? That's funny. When your name starts with an M, you can do that. That's awesome. All right, cool. So now we've got a method to get some ideas, and this is just an idea generator. You may not like any of them, and you may trash all of them and move on to something else, or you may see something just out when you're out. That's the topic you want to talk about, but we've at least got a basis. We've got a way to generate ideas. We've also talked about that a speech needs to have a beginning and a middle and an end. And now we move into a section that I like to call, well, I need to clear off my drawing first, or else that just gets confusing. I call Make It Good. And this is the point when I want to give my public service announcement. We have just learned how you can brainstorm an idea and put it together and have an idea and have a speech in 5 minutes. But I ask you this very important question that you need to ask yourself. Should you only take 5 minutes to put a speech together to then give? I, along with many of the people who are on this call, can put together a speech on a topic that we know and in 5 minutes and deliver it, and we'll fool 80 to 90% of the people in the audience that they think we rehearsed it. But that doesn't mean we should. Because just imagine if you can be that good at that level of it, what happens if you just spend another hour on it? What happens if you spend 10 hours on it? So yes, we can write a speech in 5 minutes and we can put it together and we can deliver it, but I still ask the question, should you? There are times when it's appropriate, like I gave the example of you're visiting a club, they need a last minute speaker, or you want to tell them all about the summit that's coming up. It's a great way to give that information, but let's not make it the norm. Let's make working on our speeches and practicing them. All right, so now we're into the Make It Good section of our presentation. What's coming up is just tips and tricks that I learned by sitting exactly where you guys are, listening to somebody else tell me about these items, and then I took them and I practiced them. I made them my own. I proved them to myself of what I like to use. This is not an extensive list, and I am not the foremost expert on all this. This is information and stuff that I have found works for me. All right, so make it good. Our first item, story equals passion, because here's the challenge. Here's another challenge for you guys. I want you to never, ever give a speech again. What, Jamie? Never, ever give a speech again. Instead, I want you to share stories. Share stories that are your passion, stories that you know, things that happen to you. We talked about hobbies. Those are stories that are yours. So never ever again give a speech or a presentation. I want you to share stories. And this goes for even if you are the CFO of a company and you are trying to communicate value, the market volatility that is going on right now, and you're trying to communicate that to your company, you can still do that through stories. Now, you may not spend the entire speech or presentation just with stories, but that's how you're going to connect with people. Stories connect to the inner part of people. And when you share your stories, they are going to relate to you. Because once again, who are we up there on the stage for?
Audience.
The audience. right? And we're up for them. We want to take care of them. We want them to feel there is something in us that we want to give to them. And we have to be cognizant of where they are and what they're doing and what they're thinking to get them to come along with us on this ride. So stories equal passion. Call upon stories from childhood, from recent, wherever. Just stories equal passion, and you want to share them at every chance you get. Something that makes a speech powerful is including all 5 of the senses. So that's hearing, seeing, tasting, smelling, and touching. How do you include all those? Oh man, on Thanksgiving morning, I would wake up to the smell of those fresh baked pies. My mom spent all morning, I mean, before I was up, and they were fresh coming out of the oven just as I was waking up. Now here's a question. What kind of pies were those? I didn't specifically say, but
I imagine.
Pumpkin.
pumpkin. What did you say, Nifa?
Whatever pie I imagine.
There you go. Yeah. What does somebody else see here?
Oh, is it
Apple.
apple?
I was thinking
Sweet
apple.
potato.
Sweet potato, apple, heard all kinds. But that's one way to get smell in, and that also goes along with my next point on the screen, which is drop the prop. It's a suggestion we get a lot when we're giving evaluations of, you could have used a prop to do X, you could have used a prop to do Y. But I just had you guys imagine and probably taste a pie, and I didn't even tell you what kind of pie it was. You didn't have to see it. I didn't even have to tell you what kind it was, and it was real to you. So this is where we use our audience and their imagination. Their brain is more powerful than we can show a picture of. Their brain is going to make it more powerful, because you just think of horror movies, of the stuff you don't see and how much that gets in people's brains and how it affects them. That's what you want to do as speakers, is you set up enough and you paint the word picture enough and let their brains take over. There are tons of examples of this, of dropping the prop. And another part of drop the prop for me comes, I work in technology, and more specifically, I work in supporting technology. So I know very well technology breaks and it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. So therefore, I don't trust technology. So like even tonight, I mentioned earlier that I saw my internet was unstable. I actually have my hotspot set up, ready to go to step in if I needed to tonight, because technology fails. So I always have a backup plan. So when it comes to a presentation and I'm up on stage, I know we're used to like PowerPoints, and the people that would come up and they're about to give their presentation and they're plugging in and booting up their laptop like right at that moment when they give me heart attacks. Right? Am I the only one? I'm probably the only one that's that nervous when I see, okay, no, Brandy's affirming me. Thank you. That and just trusting that technology that's just going to work like that. But anyway, dropping the prop is speaking about it lets people imagine it themselves. If I talked about my mother's slippers that she wore every day and used as a threatening device to shake in my face, and they were her favorite slippers, and when I was little, I used to see if my feet would fit in them yet, and then I can ask you, you know, what color are the slippers? And it doesn't really matter that whether I say it or not, because if I say a certain color slippers, like if I say they were black, that may throw you. What do you mean? You know, because those are not the slippers that you imagined. Your audience's imaginations and brains are powerful. Use it. The roller coaster, and that's why we get our little icon here on the side of the big, small. And this is, you guys probably know the rules of the 3 when you try to list 3 things together. We talked about 3 points earlier, the power of 3 items. This concept, the big, small of the roller coaster, is, for example, kids today, they're just awful. They're doing drugs. They're drinking while at school, and they're cutting their hair like Justin Bieber. So thank you for the laughs. I know it's a little bit of a dated joke, but that is an example of a big small. You guys laughed because you're kind. You laughed at my joke, so I appreciate that. But with an audience, if you want to get emotion out of your audience, you need to take them high to get them to go low, and you got to take them low to get them to go high. So what does that mean? And this is the whole roller coaster concept. So it can be used as small as in the statement that I had, but also big, small. So cancer rates today are horrible. So I could speak on, I have 2 good friends on Facebook that are now working their way through chemo, and it's awful. And I could bring you down, and I could get you guys to feel that emotion of down. And then I could crack a joke of, at least they're saving money on haircuts. And it's not really that funny of a joke, but if I took you low enough, that little bit of relief will get you to laugh even higher, if that makes sense. So you take people, and if you're wanting to get the big laughs, you got to go down. And if you're wanting a super serious presentation, please, and I beg you, you have to let us laugh somewhere in your presentation, because you have brought down the audience, and we have all these emotions sitting in the audience listening to you, and we have emotions, and we want to let them out. And we don't just want to start crying, because we don't want to get that sad, but we need to let out emotion. So please put in a joke. It doesn't even have to be that good. Let us laugh, and you're going to get the biggest laugh you've ever heard when you do that, because you took an audience down. They have this emotion that wants to come out, and you let it come out with a joke. And it's a great tool, and it also helps us as the audience, because once again, remember, you're there for the audience and their ride on what they're doing. Drop them off where you pick them up. This is another item that is good for your audience. We want to make sure that you are picking up your audience at the beginning of your speech, taking them on the journey through your speech, and then dropping them back off at the end. Have you guys ever seen like a mid-season finale of any TV show, mid-season finale, and they leave you on that cliffhanger? They may answer a couple of questions, but they leave you on that cliffhanger because they want you to come back and watch the next season. Don't do that to your speakers. Conclude it for your speakers. Yeah, I see Game of Thrones. Also, yeah, Game of Thrones. There's also, I usually use the Marvels movie, but most of the time when I ask people, they haven't seen the Marvels, the Endgame movie. Same thing, like that. The second to last movie was not very fulfilling because it didn't finish it. You got to drop them off where you picked them up. Just being kind to your audience, and also be yourself. There's already everybody else. Be yourself. I have talked, and I did this myself, of a lot of first-time speakers. They come into Toastmasters, and one of the things they do is they turn into Presentation Jamie. And this is my presentation and my slides. And look, I am presenting. Well, that's not me. As soon as they break out of that and they relax and they start making jokes and maybe having a couple ums and ahs. Yes, it happens in everyday language. It's okay. Be yourself, because everybody else is already taken. All right, let's talk about some rules on making it good. This is specifically when thinking about an international winning speech. This is what it goes to, but it holds true for just good stories for everybody to give. You can't be the hero of the story. So you can't be the one that flies into the village and saves all the children from the evil monster. But you can be the person who starts a business at a young age and struggles and has to make choices between family and work and struggles and becomes a billionaire out of that. That is you're going through a change, going through a struggle. And why? Because people relate to struggles. People relate to that struggle and strife in your life. Most of us don't relate too well to just success for success sake. And we don't want to hear about it either. So we'd rather hear and relate to you about your struggle. One of my favorite quotes ever, I quote it all the time. Don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. And yeah, yes, absolutely. And Mark Twain tells us this. So what does that mean? So you don't want to be up there just lying. But if something happened on Friday night and not Saturday morning, but it works better in your story on Saturday morning, it happened Saturday morning. I have a keynote that I'm giving that in it, every single item that's in it is true. Like every story that I tell is true. It just didn't happen in the order of which I'm telling it. And there's no problem with that. I give a workshop where I give an example of growth mindset. It's actually the opposite of growth mindset. And I tell the story of I was getting certified for being a rescue scuba diver. And that's when Brad came out of the water, started charging at me and the other instructors and said, he won't let me bring him up. So this story, and I know that story doesn't make a lot of sense. I just don't want to spend time on telling the whole thing. That story happened. I wasn't there. That story was told to me, but it makes more sense if I turn it around and tell it from my point of view to your audience instead of going, and then my husband said he did this, and then my husband said he did. Just turn it around and tell it. So don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. But you have to believe that, but you have to believe it when you're telling it. And there are things that just get added into stories just to help them make sense. And that is okay. Okay. That is just so important to practice. So important. I practice all the time. I practice on my coworkers, unsuspecting coworkers. I'm telling a story and I'll know, oh, this order of words, they didn't laugh. Okay, let me try the order of words on I go to a different meeting. I try the order of words on them and then I get a laugh. I'm like, oh, okay, that's how that should be told. Practice, 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 practice. Because of the tagline up there. You ever like not go to Toastmasters because you were like on vacation or something for a couple of weeks? You get back in a Toastmasters club and they call on you for table topics and you're like, you forget how to speak. Yeah, true story. Happens to me all the time. All right, a couple more rules. This is how you want to make it funny. These are a couple rules that you can follow to make sure that your audience will laugh. Never tell a joke, share your failures. You know, sandwich walks into a bar and the bartender says, hey, we don't serve food here. That's not particularly funny, although I know, thank you for giggling. I do appreciate that. But if you're sharing your failures of when I couldn't seem to get in my head that I needed to turn off the shower before I pulled my towel in to dry me off, that's funny. Well, okay, I need to figure out a different way to, not enough of y'all laughed. I got to figure out a different way to tell that now. So there's my practice point right there. I'm going to practice that. But share your failures. And once again, why? Because they're relatable. People want to relate to you as a speaker. I was talking to somebody over the weekend about another person who was giving a presentation outside of this at work. And I just said that I can't put my finger on it, but I don't relate to that speaker. I just can't get into to relate to them, so they don't speak to me. Try to relate to your audience. That's because you're there for your audience. Borrow stories from others. Like I talked about, the story that I use for this workshop is actually a story of my husband's that I just changed to tell from first person. It's okay to borrow other stories. And I'll tell people all the time, somebody will say something funny at work. I'm like, that's making my next speech. And I start making a note. It's okay. So if you want to test if it's funny for a wide audience, and this is specifically for like the international speech contest, here are the 3 things that you can test to make sure that it is going to be funny to everybody. And that's, would you tell your grandma? Oh my goodness, I'm so glad I grew up before social media was a big thing. And I'm glad that this thing, the just in general, don't post anything you wouldn't tell your grandma. I'm so glad it's an aside there, but I'm so glad I grew up under that. Would 2 different cultures understand it? That's probably a challenging one. And when 2 different generations understand it. So that's if you're trying to get to a wide audience to see if everybody in your audience is going to laugh. That's one of those tips for the international speech items. That was a lot of information. coming at you, a lot of tips and tricks, a lot of stuff that I have tried out and I like. It's not the end all be all. But we have now come to the portion where we have to prove the workshop. Ta-da! I am actually going to give you guys 5 minutes. We're going to sit in silence for 5 minutes. You can pick the original brainstorming that you did or the mind mapping. You can do a new one, but I want you to pick a subject and I want you to involve one or many of the techniques that we just went over. And we're only going to do it. We're not going to do normal 5 to 7 minute speech. We'll do a 2 to 3. And I got Chris who's going to show us the lights and time us for that. So I will want some examples when we come back from it. But for right now, I'll give you a full 5 minutes, pick a subject, and let's get a speech written in 5 minutes. All right. That was 5 minutes. How do we feel about what we have in front of us? You have at least a starting of something? Could you, if you had to, if I twisted your arm, could you go stand up and give a speech? Maybe. Yes. Hey, the workshop worked. You wrote a speech in 5 minutes. Yay, I didn't lie in my subject. Yay. Okay, now I would love to hear what some of y'all came up with. Who would like to volunteer? Bridget, go ahead, please.
You know me, I'm always up to volunteer. I love to write, but everybody I knew lived near me. So I set off to find people in far off lands with whom I could converse on paper, with a pen and stamps. I found said people at an organization called International Pen Friends. I joyfully wrote 15 letters to new people I knew I was destined to become best friends with. And I waited for a reply and waited and waited. Alas, I did not know it would be some 2 months before I would receive a response, as that is the way with snail mail. However, as a birthday gift to me from the letter writing gods, they bestowed upon me the gift of a letter from a far off land, from a lad in London, England. I floated into my house and devoured the letter. With excitement, I wrote back and again waited for a reply. Within weeks, a reply came back, and thus began the courtship of Adam and Bridget. We continued our writings for over a year, and when we could resist no longer, my faraway friend flew to meet me live in person. We waited an excruciating 2 months, and through this whirlwind romance, we found ourselves wed. And thus began the saga of Brit and Yank.
That is awesome. Awesome. I love it. Because you took a subject, obviously, you know well. At least I hope you know your spouse.
I am a bit familiar with it, yes.
And what was it? I mean, I was hanging on every word. How about you guys? It was an interesting story, right? Because she was telling her story, and it came from her. All right, let's hear another example. And Chris is playing our timer, so he will help with the timing lights for us. Who else would like to share their speech that they just wrote? Amy, is that a hand up or are you clapping? It's clapping. Okay. All right, Twyla, go ahead.
When I retired from the library, took the golden handshake and left, I went to work for a tour bus company called Via. And they would pick up the passengers at the Amtrak station and take them into Yosemite for the day. They would see all the beautiful waterfalls. They would see all the beautiful meadows, have lunch at the beautiful, beautiful Awani Hotel. And let me tell you, the food there is wonderful. They would see some more sights, do a little shopping, of course, and then get on the bus, be back at the Amtrak station that night and back to San Francisco. But the drivers are always very, very careful when they take these tourists into the valley to tell them that the animals are wild. It's not Bambi, it's not Smokey the Bear. These are wild animals. Leave them alone. It's their land. Don't bother them. Well, this particular day, they had done the usual things. They'd had the lunch at the Wani. They came back to the river to stop for the final photo op of the falls across the valley. Everybody out. And lo and behold, there was a bear there by the river. And this one lady just couldn't resist. She got her camera and she's getting closer and closer and closer and closer until finally the bear has had it. He has moved along, and she's followed him right up till he has had enough. And he stands up and she realizes she's in trouble. She turns around and runs back to the bus. And the driver shut the door on her, wouldn't let her in. Because that company has a policy never to let a woman in with a bear behind.
All right, I fell for that one. All right.
You got me.
Yeah, I fell for that one. Oh, good story though. I mean, I was hanging on every part of it, and it was a great story. So, what I failed to do on Bridget's was go through what are the items that she used. So, Bridget told and Twylis told us a story. We had some different senses involved in that one, I believe. At least our sense of adventure on both of those. Nobody went and grabbed a prop, right? So we were okay on that one. They were themselves. Right. So do you guys see? Hopefully, I have convinced you that on a couple of things. You know, first, it's easy to generate the ideas. We now have a tool that we can generate these ideas with and how to flesh them out. And then just you want to tell your stories because that's the passion. That's what people want to listen to. Your audience is the most important piece, right? How do they feel? What are you doing to them? They should be your first and foremost in mind. And really, just because you can write a speech in 5 minutes and deliver it doesn't mean that you always should. So what's next? What is next after this? Anybody want to guess? What do you need to go do now?
Write and practice.
Exactly. It is time to practice because that's how you're going to get better. That's how you're going to learn what is funny for you, because what's funny for me is not necessarily funny for you. So you got to go work on that, go figure it out, go practice it. Thank you so much for your time and attention here today. I really hope that you got a lot out of this workshop. I enjoy giving it. It's a lot of fun, especially I've given it a couple of times, and just the stories that people haven't come up with. I actually absolutely enjoy it. So thank you so much for attending tonight, and I will turn this back over to Brandy.
Jamie, thank you so much. I now have at least 3 speeches to give. I thank you. Now, Joyce Trimble has or will be dropping an invitation to attend the informational first meeting of What's Cooking Toastmasters into the chat. Please share it with your friends who like to talk about eating and cooking. I stress the talking about. I know Joyce hates to cook and she tries to avoid it as much as possible. Now, we are available to stay and answer all questions, but we do want to be mindful of the time. You are free to move about the kitchen.